Amidst the chaos of a sun-scorched city, where honking horns and hurried footsteps blurred into an indifferent rhythm, a single moment froze time. A four-man's gaze locked onto a frail girl, holding a tattered sign that begged for a miracle. That afternoon, the relentless sun blazed high above the city, intensifying the cacophony of honking horns and hurried footsteps, echoing the crowded streets. The Motorcade, led by Donald Trump's Cadillac, won, sliced through the congestion like a beacon of authority. Bystanders paused, their eyes tracking the sleek, imposing convoy with awe and curiosity. Inside the lead vehicle, Trump sat intently listening to an advisor's briefing when his gaze was pulled by something on the sidewalk, a fleeting but powerful image. His brow furrowed as he leaned closer to the window. Amidst the throngs of bustling pedestrians, a frail girl, perhaps 10 years old, stood frozen in place. In her trembling hands, she held a battered cardboard sign, its message hastily scrawled but heartbreakingly clear: "Please help. My family desperately needs a miracle." Her tattered gray hoodie hung loosely over her thin frame, and strands of tangled hair obscured her dirt-smudged face. Yet her wide, searching blue eyes pierced through the chaos, desperately seeking compassion in a world that seemed determined to ignore her. Trump's expression darkened with concern. Without hesitation, he issued a firm yet calm command: "Stop the car." The sudden halt of the motorcade sent a ripple of shock through the surrounding vehicles. Advisors and security personnel exchanged alarmed glances, their tension palpable. A bodyguard leaned forward cautiously. "Sir, this isn't a safe area. We should proceed," he warned, his tone urgent. Trump's gaze never wavered from the small figure on the sidewalk. "No," he interrupted, his voice resolute. "I want to know that girl's story." An uneasy silence fell inside the car, but no one dared to challenge his decision. Trump opened the door and stepped out into the sun-drenched street. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. Heads turned, conversations stilled, and a few onlookers hastily raised their phones to capture the unexpected scene. Slowly, Trump approached the girl, his towering frame softening as he crouched slightly to meet her gaze. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently, his voice both comforting and authoritative. The girl flinched slightly, her eyes darting nervously between Trump and the security guards flanking him. Her hands tightened around the sign as though it were a shield. My name is Emma," she finally stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Trump nodded softly, his gaze unwavering but kind. "Emma, why are you standing here?" he prompted, lowering his voice further to ease her nerves. Emma hesitated, biting her lip. The weight of her struggles threatened to choke her words, but she found her courage. "My mom, she's really sick," she confessed, her voice cracking. "We don't have a home anymore. My dad died in the war." A heavy silence fell around them. Trump's expression shifted, his eyes now shadowed with something deeper than sympathy. "Where did your dad serve?" he asked quietly. "In the Middle East, sir," Emma replied, tears brimming in her eyes. "He was a soldier, a hero. But after he died, everything fell apart." The gravity of Emma's words hit Trump like a physical blow. For a brief moment, he remained still, absorbing the weight of her story. Straightening his posture, he inhaled deeply and turned to his entourage, his voice now tinged with fierce determination. "Get the car ready. We're going to see where Emma lives." His tone left no room for discussion. A bodyguard immediately stepped forward, his face tight with concern. "Sir, this is extremely dangerous," he cautioned in a hushed but firm voice. "We cannot guarantee your safety in that area." Trump's gaze hardened, his eyes like steel. "If a child can stand on a busy street to save her mother, then I can risk going to where they live. If anyone here is too afraid, you're free to leave," he said coolly. His words sent a wave of silence through his entourage. No one dared to protest further. Turning back to Emma, Trump gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Lead the way, Emma. Let's go meet your mother," he said softly but with determination. The motorcade began to crawl through the narrowing streets, a stark contrast to the broad avenues lined with glittering skyscrapers just minutes earlier. The luxury storefronts gave way to dilapidated tenements, sagging roofs, and alleys strewn with trash. The air felt heavier, as if weighed down by years of hardship. Inside the car, Emma sat quietly, her small hands resting nervously on her lap. Her wide eyes reflected both hope and apprehension, while her pressed lips revealed a steely resolve. This was her one chance to save her family, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. "We're almost there, Mr. Trump," Emma whispered, pointing out the window to a makeshift house at the far end of a darkened alley. Trump nodded, his expression darkening as he took in the sight. It wasn't just a house, it was a crumbling reminder of forgotten lives. He now understood that this wasn't just a visit, it was the beginning of a mission to change Emma's life and countless others like her. The motorcade rolled to a stop in front of a dilapidated structure, its door haphazardly patched together from splintered planks. The roof, rusted and riddled with holes, sagged dangerously. Children with dirt-streaked faces peered cautiously from the shadows, their wide eyes glued to the gleaming vehicles. Trump stepped out, his gaze sweeping across the impoverished surroundings with grim determination. His security team quickly fanned out, scanning the area for any threats. Emma, her small hand gripping Trump's firmly, led him to the front door. It creaked loudly as she pushed it open. "My mom is inside," she said, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. Trump entered the cramped, dimly lit room. His eyes were immediately drawn to a frail woman lying on a sagging bed in the corner. Her hollow cheeks and cracked lips spoke of long suffering. She struggled to sit up, her eyes widening in disbelief at the sight of strangers filling her tiny home. "Mom, this is Mr. Trump," Emma said quietly, hope shining in her voice. "He's here to help us." The woman blinked, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Trump," she murmured, as if unsure whether to believe what she was seeing. Trump knelt beside her, extending his hand with a steady, compassionate gaze. "You don't need to say anything," he reassured her warmly. "Emma did an incredible job bringing me here. Now, I'd like to hear your story." The woman clutched her daughter's hand as though drawing strength from her. "My husband Daniel was a soldier," she began weakly, her voice trembling with emotion. "He gave his life for this country. And after he was gone, we lost everything." Trump listened intently, his jaw tightening. He knew in that moment that this mission had just become deeply personal. The frail woman on the bed continued, her voice barely audible but steady, each word etched with sorrow. "My husband Daniel served in the Middle East. He gave his life for this country, leaving me and Emma behind. After he died, I got sick. I couldn't work anymore, and everything fell apart. We lost our home, our belongings, and now, this is all we have left." Trump's gaze traveled across the dimly lit room, taking in every heartbreaking detail. The patched-up walls allowed no natural light to enter. In one corner stood a precariously balanced, broken chair, while old, worn boxes stacked on top of each other served as makeshift storage. The oppressive silence of poverty hung in the air. It was a scene of hopelessness, one that spoke louder than any words. Emma's voice, trembling and soft, broke through the stillness. "My mom has been sick for a long time," she whispered, her small hands clutching the hem of her faded hoodie. "I've tried to help her, but I don't know what to do anymore. I don't want her to die." Trump froze, her words hitting him like a punch to the chest. The desperation in Emma's eyes pierced through the heavy silence. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint creaking of the dilapidated roof above them. He gazed deeply into the young girl's wide eyes, absorbing the depth of her pain and fear. This was more than just a story of one family's misfortune, it was a call for immediate action. Trump turned to his entourage, his voice commanding and filled with urgency. "I need a full report on this family situation immediately. Her mother's health must be evaluated tonight." His tone brooked no argument. One of his advisors hesitated, stepping closer to speak in a hushed voice. "Sir, this is a dangerous area. We shouldn't stay here too long. It would be safer and more efficient to let specialized organizations handle this." Trump turned sharply, his eyes narrowing with resolve. "She doesn't need promises. She needs action. I'm not leaving until I know that both of them are going to get the help they need." He knelt beside Emma, resting a firm but reassuring hand on her small shoulder. "Emma, you've done something incredibly brave today. You've been fighting for your mom, and now it's my turn to fight for both of you." The woman on the bed broke down, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "Mr. Trump, thank you. I don't even know what to say," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of emotion. Trump looked at her with steady compassion. "You don't need to say anything," he replied gently. "Your husband gave his life for this country. The least we can do is ensure that his family is taken care of." His voice lowered, but it remained resolute. "This is a debt we owe you. You and Emma will not be forgotten." As Trump stepped out of the crumbling house, the scene outside had transformed. A crowd had gathered, men, women, and children from the surrounding neighborhood. Their faces, worn with years of hardship, were filled with curiosity and cautious hope. They watched him intently, as though daring to believe that something could finally change. Trump turned back, glancing first at Emma and her mother, then at the onlookers. His voice, strong and authoritative, echoed through the alley. "This isn't just the story of one family. This is the story of thousands of families who have been left behind. We are going to change that starting today. At first, the applause was hesitant, like the first spark of a fire, but it quickly grew louder, spreading through the crowd. Faces that had long been etched with despair now brightened with a glimmer of hope. Emma stood next to her mother, gripping her hand tightly. Her wide eyes sparkled with a newfound faith. Trump turned to his advisors and spoke with unwavering conviction. This journey doesn't end here. This is only the beginning. In that moment, Trump didn't just bring hope to Emma and her mother. He ignited a beacon of possibility for an entire struggling community. As Trump stepped out of the dilapidated home, the atmosphere outside had transformed. The crowd of residents had grown significantly, their eyes reflecting cautious optimism where there had once been only distrust. Some stood at a distance, watching quietly, while others huddled closer, their expressions tinged with awe. Children, with dirt-smeared faces, clung to one another, their wide eyes filled with wonder at the scene unfolding before them. The broken alley was momentarily alive with a palpable energy, hope tentatively clawing its way through the despair. Trump paused, his eyes scanning the crumbling surroundings. The rows of dilapidated homes with sagging roofs, trash-littered alleys, and faces worn by hardship were etched into his mind. His jaw tightened. These weren't just statistics or figures in a report. These were families forgotten and discarded by a system that had failed them. An advisor hurried to his side, his tone urgent. "Sir, we need to leave immediately. This area isn't safe. Your presence is attracting too much attention. If anything happens, we won't be able to respond in time." Trump turned to face him, his gaze as cold and unyielding as steel. "I'm not here for attention," he replied sharply. "I'm here to take action." The advisor pressed further, his voice insistent. "So you can act from your office. You can issue directives and send in support teams to handle this." Trump shook his head, cutting him off mid-sentence. "If I leave now, it sends one message that I'm unwilling to confront the reality of what's happening here. I won't abandon these people for convenience. They've waited long enough." Another security agent approached, his voice low. "Sir, there's a group of young men gathering at the end of the alley. We're not sure of their intentions, but the situation could escalate." Trump glanced toward the shadowy figures standing silently at the edge of the alley. Their expressions were unreadable, but there was a tension in the air that couldn't be ignored. He exhaled deeply and turned back to his team. "Do your job and protect the area, but I won't leave just because of fear." He then knelt beside Emma, placing a gentle but firm hand on her shoulder. "Emma, lead me to your neighbors. They need to understand more about what's happening here." Emma hesitated, the weight of responsibility pressing on her small frame. After a brief pause, she nodded with quiet determination. "I'll show you," she whispered. Together, Trump, Emma, and a few guards moved cautiously down the narrow alley. Eyes peered out from doorways and windows, weary and suspicious, yet curious. The sight of a powerful man walking through their impoverished world was something they never expected to see. A middle-aged man with a weathered face stood near the entrance of a dilapidated house. As Trump approached, the man stepped forward, his voice hoarse and laden with disbelief. "Mr. Trump, I can't believe you're actually here," he said, shaking his head. "But if you are, you need to know something. We're not just poor, we've been forgotten. No one cares about us." Trump stopped, his gaze steady as he listened. The man continued, his voice now tinged with bitterness and sorrow. "Most of us here are families of veterans, people who gave everything for this country. But after they were gone, we were left with nothing. My son had to drop out of school. We survive on scraps, but it's never enough." Trump's eyes hardened as he looked around again, taking in the reality these families lived in every day. He turned to one of his advisors, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "I want a full report on every family here, their needs, their struggles. And I want it on my desk by tomorrow morning." The advisor hesitated. "Sir, perhaps we should start by coordinating with local agencies," Trump interrupted, his tone resolute. "No, they've waited long enough. We act now. If a young girl can stand on a street corner begging for help, then we have no excuse to delay any longer." The weight of his words hung in the air. The once quiet crowd began to murmur, their hopes solidifying with each passing moment. Emma, standing beside Trump, gazed up at him with newfound admiration. For the first time in years, the people of this forgotten community dared to believe that change was coming. Trump returned to the front of Emma's house, stepping onto the worn, creaking steps that barely held under his weight. The crowd outside had swelled, their faces a sea of hope mixed with disbelief. Men, women, and children alike stared with bated breath, as though waiting for a spark that might reignite dreams long extinguished. Trump's expression hardened with resolve. He took a step forward, his gaze sweeping over the weary crowd. The air was thick with expectation, and the faint whispers of anticipation seemed to hang in the humid stillness. With a voice that carried authority yet compassion, Trump began. "No family, especially a family that has sacrificed for this country, should have to live like this," he declared. His words echoed off the surrounding walls, filling the alley with a weight that demanded attention. "You have been forgotten, but that ends today." A hush fell over the crowd. The only sounds were the occasional rustling of fabric as people shifted nervously, hanging on every word. Eyes widened in shock and awe was a foreign feeling here, yet now it was beginning to creep back into their hearts. Trump continued, his voice unwavering. "I promise you this. I will not only help Emma and her mother, I will help every single one of you. Together, we will change this." For a few moments, there was silence, stifling, almost unbearable. Then, a hesitant clap broke the stillness. Another joined. Soon, the applause grew, swelling like a tide. It was no longer timid or scattered. It was full and booming, a sound that reverberated through the broken alley like a declaration of hope. Tears glistened on the faces of several bystanders. Mothers clutched their children tightly, some sobbing quietly as if a burden they had carried alone for years was finally shared. Trump turned and knelt down to Emma's level, gently taking her small hand in his. His voice softened, but his words carried the same unrelenting conviction. "Emma, thank you for having the courage to speak up. You didn't just save your mother today. You helped your entire community." He squeezed her hand gently, meeting her tear-filled eyes. "I promise you I won't let you down." Emma nodded, her lips trembling as she tried to hold back tears. For the first time in what felt like forever, she believed that maybe, just maybe, her family's nightmare was ending. Trump rose, and with a final glance at the crowd, strode purposefully toward the waiting Cadillac 1. The security team scrambled to maintain formation around him, but he remained unfazed. Before stepping into the car, he turned to his lead security officer and spoke with steel in his voice. "From this moment forward, this is my top priority. I want every available resource mobilized immediately. And remember, I will personally oversee every step of this initiative." The officer nodded, sensing the gravity of the command. Trump climbed into the vehicle, pausing briefly to take in the scene one last time. The motorcade began to move slowly, rolling out of the slum. Yet the crowd remained, their eyes fixed on the figure of the man who had given them something precious: hope. Children waved enthusiastically, their voices rising in unison, shouting words of gratitude. Adults whispered among themselves, exchanging cautious but inspired looks. Some clasped hands in prayer. Trump's words, promises, and actions had ignited something that had long been missing, a belief that their lives could change. But for Trump, this was only the beginning. He knew that igniting hope was one thing. Turning it in lasting action would be a mission far greater than this day's events. The motorcade vanished into the distance, but its impact lingered like an unbreakable promise in the hearts of those left behind. The long journey to redemption and transformation had begun. Trump stood motionless for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the crowd that had gathered outside Emma's house. The group, which had swelled since his earlier declaration, now filled the narrow alley. Faces that had once held suspicion and fatigue were beginning to shift, tinged with something fragile yet powerful: hope. Children clung to their mothers, wide-eyed and awestruck. A few men stood at a distance, their guarded expressions softening as they watched the scene unfold. The atmosphere was charged, almost electric, with anticipation. Suddenly, a security officer approached Trump, his voice hushed but tense. "Sir, we've spotted a group of young men gathering near the alley entrance. We're unsure of their intentions, but they may pose a risk." Trump glanced toward the shadowed end of the alley. There, a small group of individuals stood, their faces unreadable. They weren't making any moves, simply observing, their postures tense but non-threatening for the moment. Trump exhaled deeply, his gaze firm. "Let them watch," he said calmly. "Do your job and secure the area, but I won't be intimidated. I came here to take action, and I'm not leaving until I understand exactly what these families are facing." The security team exchanged uneasy glances but complied with the order. Trump turned back to Emma, placing a comforting hand on her small shoulder. "Emma," he said gently, "I want to see more of your neighborhood. Take me to your neighbors. I need to hear their stories too." Emma hesitated, glancing nervously toward the watching crowd and the distant figures at the alley's edge. But something in Trump's steady gaze reassured her. She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll show you," she whispered. With Emma leading the way, Trump and a few security guards moved cautiously through the winding alley. Doors creaked open, and eyes peered out from behind cracked windows and worn curtains. The air was thick with unspoken questions, disbelief, and curiosity. People whispered to one another, their words drowned out by the crunch of gravel beneath Trump's polished shoes. Near a sagging, ramshackle house, a middle-aged man with a weathered face and sunken eyes stood watching them. As Trump approached, the man took a hesitant step forward. His voice was hoarse, as though unused to speaking loudly. "Mr. Trump, I can't believe you're actually here," he said, "but since you are, you need to know something. We're not just poor, we've been forgotten. Nobody cares about us." Trump stopped and met the man's gaze. His expression remained serious, unwavering, as he listened intently. The man continued, his voice filled with both sorrow and quiet anger. "Most of us here are families of people who serve this country. My son had to drop out of school to help us survive. We scrape by on whatever we can find, but it's never enough. It's like we don't exist to the rest of the world." Trump surveyed the crumbling homes around him. Children played barefoot in the dirt, while weary adults stood in doorways, their faces lined with exhaustion. Turning to one of his advisors, Trump spoke with a sharp, commanding tone that cut through the tense atmosphere. "I want a full report on every family here, their needs, their struggles, and I want it on my desk by tomorrow morning." The advisor hesitated. "Sir, we could coordinate this with local agencies." Trump didn't let him finish. "They've waited long enough. We're not going to waste more time. If Emma can stand on a street corner asking for help, then we have no excuse to delay." The advisor swallowed nervously and nodded. There was no arguing with Trump's resolve. As they returned to Emma's house, the crowd had grown even larger. Trump climbed the creaking steps once more and faced the gathered residents. His voice rang out, strong and unwavering. "No family, especially the family of someone who was sacrificed for this country, should ever have to live like this. You've been forgotten, but that ends today. I promise you that I will not only help Emma and her mother, but every one of you. Together, we will change these conditions." The silence that followed was broken by a single clap, then another. Gradually, the applause grew, filling the alley with a resounding wave of hope. Tears streamed down the faces of some onlookers as they grasped the significance of Trump's words. Emma stood beside her mother, gripping her hand tightly, her wide eyes sparkling with newfound faith. Trump turned to Emma, kneeling once more. "You've done something remarkable today," he said softly. "You didn't just save your mom. You've helped this entire community. I promise I won't let you down." The crowd erupted in applause again, louder this time, as Trump rose to his full height. The moment was transformative. For the first time in years, the people felt seen, and finally they dared to hope. Trump gently took Emma's hand, his eyes soft yet resolute. "Thank you for having the courage to speak up," he said in a low, heartfelt tone. "You didn't just help your mom. You've given this entire community hope. I promise you, I will not let you down." The crowd watched in silence, their gazes filled with a mixture of awe and gratitude, as Trump rose to his full height. Slowly, he stepped toward his waiting motorcade. Before closing the door, he turned to his head of security, his voice firm and authoritative. "From this day forward, this is my top priority. I want every available resource mobilized immediately, and I will personally oversee every step of this initiative." The Cadillac one began to roll forward, the motorcade slowly making its way out of the slum. Yet the crowd remained rooted in place, their eyes following Trump's figure as it disappeared down the narrow streets. Whispers filled the air, hopeful murmurs of change finally on the horizon. But for Trump, this moment wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a far-reaching mission that would transform countless lives. Within weeks, Emma's story had captured the nation's attention. A video of Trump halting Motorcade to approach the young girl had gone viral across social media, stirring millions. The image of him holding Emma's hand as they walked through the slum undaunted by potential danger moved people from all walks of life. On Twitter, the hashtag #HopeForHeroes began trending nationwide. Thousands shared not only Emma's story, but also their own tales of sacrifice and the struggles faced by veteran families. One comment stood out: "Emma isn't just a little girl, she's a symbol of all the forgotten families in America. We can't turn our backs on them anymore." The momentum did not stop there. The Hope for Heroes initiative, spearheaded by Trump, swiftly evolved into a national campaign. Corporate giants such as Amazon, Walmart, and Apple pledged multi-million-dollar donations to support the cause. Nonprofits across America partnered to create tangible programs aimed at providing housing, healthcare, and job opportunities for veteran families. Individual acts of kindness multiplied as well. In Texas, a teacher donated her entire bonus to help a struggling veteran family. In California, high school students organized a drive to collect school supplies for the children of servicemen and women. Meanwhile, a veteran in Ohio volunteered to repair homes for families in his neighborhood. Emma's courage inspired me, one volunteer explained during a televised interview. I want to do my part, no matter how small, to make a difference. Emma and her mother quickly became the focal point of a national movement, their story spreading like wildfire across the country. Invitations poured in from major television programs, all eager to hear firsthand how a simple plea for help had led to a tidal wave of compassion and change. During one particularly emotional interview, Emma's mother, her voice trembling with gratitude, reflected, "I used to believe we'd never have a chance at a normal life, but now I see hope not just for me and Emma, but for so many other families like ours." To commemorate the movement's impact, Trump organized a special event at the White House inviting veteran families, volunteers, and supporters who had contributed to the Hope for Heroes initiative. It wasn't just a moment of celebration, it was a declaration of long-term commitment to uplifting those who had sacrificed for the nation. The grandeur of the ceremony was matched only by the sincerity of its purpose. In his speech to the hundreds gathered, Trump's voice carried both resolve and emotion. "Emma is a courageous little girl," he declared, "and her story has changed the way we view our responsibility to those who have sacrificed for this country. Today we honor veterans' families, but more importantly, we commit to ensuring they never have to suffer in silence again." Trump called upon communities across the nation to continue their support. "Each of us can do something, no matter how small, to help those in need," he urged. "Together, let's build an America where no one is forgotten." Amid applause, Emma and her mother were invited to join Trump on stage. Dressed in a simple white dress, Emma hesitated for a moment, glancing at the expectant crowd. Slowly, she stepped forward, her small hands clutching the edge of the podium. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but unwavering. "I never thought a small cardboard sign could change anything," she began. "I just wanted to save my mom. But now I see that when we have the courage to stand up, we can change the whole world." The audience erupted into thunderous applause, the sound reverberating throughout the hall. Many in the crowd wiped away tears, deeply moved by the sincerity and bravery of the young girl who had unknowingly sparked a national tension. For the first time in years, there was a palpable sense of unity and hope. The Hope for Heroes movement continued to expand beyond veteran families, extending aid to other underserved communities. State governments began modeling practical assistance programs after the initiative, bringing services such as housing, healthcare, and education to those in need. One television commentator remarked, "For the first time in years, we're witnessing real unity. Hope for Heroes isn't just a movement, it's a revival of social responsibility and compassion." The movement's ripple effects were undeniable. A flood of stories about hope and transformation filled the media, inspiring communities nationwide. Emma's bravery had not only changed her own life, but also brought light to thousands of families who had long been overlooked. Yet Trump knew that this was just the beginning. His resolve deepened as he vowed to ensure that no family would ever be left behind again. Months later, Hope for Heroes had brought monumental change. Thousands of veteran families had received crucial support, from housing to healthcare and job opportunities. Across the country, hearts were inspired and lives were renewed, all because one little girl had dared to ask for help and one man had chosen to act. On a radiant, cloudless morning, Donald Trump stood at the National Mall for a historic ceremony dedicated to unveiling a new memorial honoring fallen veterans and their families. The atmosphere was solemn yet charged with hope as crowds of attendees gathered from across the country. The memorial itself was a deeply moving work of art. A bronze statue depicting a soldier kneeling beside his young daughter, her tiny hand resting in his. It symbolized both the sacrifices made by soldiers and the enduring bonds of family and legacy. The inscription at the base read, "They gave everything, and now we must ensure they are never forgotten." Emma and her mother were honored guests at the event, their story having become a beacon of hope for countless families nationwide. As the cover was drawn back from the statue, a thunderous wave of applause erupted from the crowd. Some wept openly, their tears reflecting both sorrow and gratitude for the sacrifices the statue represented. Cameras flashed, and the emotional resonance of the moment etched itself into the hearts of all present. Trump approached the podium, his expression resolute yet tender, his voice carrying the gravity of the occasion. "Today, we are not just unveiling a memorial," he began, "we are engraving a permanent reminder into the heart of our nation. Those who have sacrificed for this country deserve our deepest respect, and their families deserve a future worthy of that sacrifice." Emma's story has reminded us that courage knows no age and that hope can illuminate even the darkest places. His words hung in the air like a solemn pledge, drawing murmurs of agreement and renewed applause. The clapping intensified, transforming into a powerful standing ovation. Trump paused, his eyes scanning the sea of faces before him. Slowly, he gestured warmly toward Emma, inviting her to the stage. The crowd's cheering softened to a reverent hush as the young girl stepped forward, her simple white dress catching the morning sunlight. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone, her eyes filled with both determination and awe at the moment before her. "I'm just a little girl," Emma began, her voice quivering but clear. "All I wanted was to save my mom. I never thought a small cardboard sign could change anything. But now, thanks to Mr. Trump and everyone here, I've learned that even the smallest actions can change the world. Thank you for not only helping my mom and me, but for helping so many other families like ours." The silence that followed was brief, shattered by a wave of applause that rippled through the crowd like thunder. People rose to their feet, cheering and clapping with heartfelt intensity. Many wiped away tears, deeply moved by Emma's sincerity. The emotional power of her words transcended the ceremony, touching everyone present with the reminder that hope and courage could create miracles in the face of despair. The memorial quickly became more than just a structure. It stood as a lasting symbol of the Hope for Heroes movement. Inspired by its message, states across the country began implementing support programs modeled after the initiative, offering tangible aid to families of veterans and underserved communities. News outlets chronicled stories of transformation, from families finally receiving proper health care and housing to communities rallying together to provide job opportunities and education. Trump, true to his word, continued to personally oversee the operations of the Hope for Heroes Fund. He attended community events, inspired volunteers, and rallied further support. One journalist summed it up powerfully: "This isn't just a story about one man's compassion. It's about how a little girl with nothing but a cardboard sign sparked a movement that changed a nation." Emma's courage became a rallying cry. Around the world, countless people facing similar struggles drew strength from her story. The movement inspired a call to action, to donate, volunteer, or even share stories of kindness and hope. As the video chronicling these events concluded, it urged viewers to take part in spreading compassion. Every share is a spark of hope. Every action, a step toward change. In a world where peace is often taken for granted, Emma's story serves as a profound reminder of the sacrifices that sustain it. Too many families of those who served are forgotten, struggling silently in the shadows of society. This tale urges us to open our eyes to the hidden battles around us and to realize that even small acts of kindness can ignite hope and transformation. Compassion is not just a gesture, but a duty to those who gave everything. It is time for all of us to stand up, support those in need, and ensure no one is ever left behind.